Hello, and welcome to my Modular 12 case study by Kelly Gatewood. In this study, we got a case that we had to evaluate. And so in the first section, I would like to talk about the people that are involved in this case study. And the first person was Joe Rawlings, and he was the superintendent of Lightville Community School District. And then it went on to talk about our community, and it was divided into three people when they were trying to decide, or three groups when they were trying to decide on if they were going to build a new school or not. And the first group was the large landowners, and they were the ones who favored option 1 or 2, and then the new residents with the school-age children. We also had Susan Porter, who was the newly hired principal for the new school they were actually going to build. And then we talked a lot about the advisory committee, which was also called the Vision or Planning Committee. And it included 4 teachers from 4 different subject areas and 4 parents that Susan put together. Helen Burke was who ended up being the chair of the advisory committee, and she's the English and social studies teacher, but she's also important to realize a sister of the school board member, and he was the only one on the school board that was one of the landowners that voted for the new school. And then we also had Dan Kelby, and he is the physical education teacher and a member of the advisory committee also. We need to know the facts, and here are the facts of what the case was about. They had 3 options when it came to the overcrowding at the schools that they had. The first one was that they were going to build an addition to the high school and move the 6th grade there. Option 2 was to build an addition to the high school and the elementary school, or option 3, which was build a completely new building and take 6th through 8th grade there. Option 3 was ultimately the one that was selected, and it went a 4-to-1 school board vote and a 53% to 47% voters margin when it went to the community. And so that's really important to take into account when you're thinking about all of this, is how close that vote really truly was. The other facts are that they have hired this new principal, Susan, and she started about a year in advance before while the new school is being built. The advisory committee wants the principal to suggest the vision and the mission statement, and when they went to vote on that, there were 7 in support of her doing it, 1 abstained, and there was 1 against it. So the conflicts that we're dealing with this time are the community members, okay? They broke into 3 groups, like I said earlier. The landowners, who don't want the new debt for 10 years because they already have a current debt and it's going to cause their taxes and stuff to go up. The local residents, who wanted option 1 or 2 because it's less expensive and lowered their tax increase. And then the new residents, the ones that are moving to this community, wanted the new building. The advisory committee is also having a conflict that we'll talk a lot about, and that's the first one was who should be the chair of the committee, the principal or the member Helen, and it ended up that they voted Helen to be the the chair of the committee. And then they're also trying to figure out how the process for designing the mission and the vision statement should happen. The principal wants the committee to design it, and the committee wants the principal to do it because that's what they feel like she should do as a leader. Section 2 was if there's any legal or ethical issues. I did not see that there was any legal issues. The ethical issues is how do we go about getting our new vision and mission statement. So our 2 options was the principal could create it, and I felt like the pros of the principal creating it is it's showing her leadership ability, and she has the training. She knows what goes into a good mission, to a good statement. The cons is she's not from this community. She's moving there, and she's from a suburban area, moving to a rural area, and things are just different there. She could potentially have lack of buy-in from all of the stakeholders because she might not understand the priorities of the community as she makes this statement, and the committee may not like what she presents, and she may have a completely different vision than what the people on the committee thought they were wanting. The pros of the committee making the statements is it's giving them more opinions. It's more than just one person. It's created by the community members. They know what they want. They know what their expectations are, and it's going to also help them feel like they're part of the decision-making process. There are some cons to that. The cons would be the tension between the members. What if they don't agree on something? How hard will it be to narrow it down to one if they all have strong opinions? There may be too many options, and I'm unable to come to consensus, and they may spend way too much time creating the statement. We may need to move forward with other things, and if we don't have a good statement, we won't be able to move forward. So here is, in a nutshell, my sentence of what's happened. A newly created advisory committee cannot agree on who should create the philosophy and vision statements for a new middle school that is being built in an existing school district. What is missing from this case study? I haven't heard where we involve students at all in this, and ultimately it's a student school, and maybe the students should get some input on this. And then I also never read what one of the committee members abstained from voting when they took on the vote earlier. I didn't see anything missing with the place. And then with the program, I had a couple questions. Has the principal received any resistance in decisions that she's made up to this point? And what are the current mission statements for the elementary high school district? Do they already have them in place? Do they not? Do we need to revolve around them? Is this something completely new to the district that they weren't aware that they needed? Just some of the questions that I came up with. We need to prioritize the information. And I believe that the principal has taken a leadership role by creating and appointing the members to this group. She is willing to admit that some decisions should not be made just by her, and is receptive to the input of others. She knows the importance of a strong mission statement and wants all of the stakeholders to help create it. This being the first decision the community has to make, she knows it will set the tone of how all the other decisions will be made, so she needs to handle it correctly. She knows the value of a strong mission statement and wants to make sure there's a good foundation for the school when it opens next year. So here's what my plan would be if I was the principal. I would go and visit with each of the committee members individually. I'd call them on the phone, go talk to them in person, and fill them out of what they feel like is important for the goals of the school. And that way she can understand, does she have the same vision that they do? And then I would compile a list of the common goals. And before the next meeting, I would create 2 mission statements. And when we got to the next meeting, I would say, okay, you asked me as a leader to come up with some mission statements. This is what I would recommend, and use that as an opening block to get their inputs. And that way they've already had some say in it, but it's also started to narrow it down to what they want. And then hopefully by the end of the meeting, they would be able to select one final one, or however many meetings it would take to get that to where they can come up with one. And that way it's still a group consensus doing this, but yet they still feel she's taking on her leadership role that they're expecting out of her as the principal. Evaluating my plan, I thought there'd be some pros and cons to my way. I'll start with the pros. I think that it allows each person to voice their opinion. And it's also done in a way that they can say how they feel. If there was a lot of people silent at that meeting that it talked about when they were trying to figure out who was going to come up with this. Why was so many people that just sat there quietly? And so maybe this will allow them to feel like they can speak openly. It shows that she has the leadership ability, and it shows that she wants her stakeholders to be involved, and that she does not want this to be a one-man show. She knows that it's important to include everybody. And will they know how the members that stayed silent that night really feel? Why did they not say anything when they were trying to come up with who should do this? The cons to this, it's going to take her some time. She's going to have to find time to go talk to all of them. They may not have the same vision, and so she's going to have to figure out what's important to them. The other thing is, this is only a small portion of the stakeholders involved. This isn't including the whole community, and they may have different opinions than what you're actually getting. And what if you don't get all the community members what they wanted? Why is this the best decision? Why did I make this decision? I feel like that my plan is the best way to handle this situation because it shows how the principal is trying to get the most impact from all of the stakeholders while still being the leader that the community members want. The principal knows the importance of the mission statement, and she wants it to be created by the people that it's for. I feel like the community members may not completely understand why she feels that it needs to be done this way, But for it to be done, they need to be able to own it, and they need to have say in it so they own it. The situation will set the tone of how people will expect her to handle other situations presented to her in the future. She needs to take time to talk to all members of the committee and know that their goal know what their goals of the school are. I feel like she should also take some time and speak to the superintendent and keep him informed of what is taking place. And maybe at that school district, it's not the superintendent, but in our school, it would be the superintendent. She was hired to organize these committees and not make the decisions all by herself. And so she needs to make sure that she's doing what she was hired to do. How did they implement this plan? The principal was promoting the success for all stakeholders by not just agreeing to make the statements and allowing them to use it as the rubber stamp. She is using this as a learning opportunity to teach the committee how they all need to work together to accomplish what's best for the school. A strong mission statement is the central part of strategic planning and will be how so many of the future decisions will be based on and focused around. Buy-in from all of the stakeholders is needed to accomplish this. The advisory committee is a representation of the community as a whole, and with the principal being new to the rural community, she needs to know how they can work through the divide that has already been made in the community due to the closeness of the voting on the building of the school. Now that the school is actually being built, there needs to be a clear vision on the future of it. How the principal handles the situation will set the precedent for how they handle conflicts in the future. So she needs to make sure that she handles this correctly because there's a lot that's going to be based around this decision. I felt like this assignment correlated to the standard because it allowed us to determine how would we handle this situation. The problems presented in the situation had long-term effects and relied on good decision making by the leader to steer the committee in the right direction. It also had us reflecting on the importance of a good mission statement and how they should be created. I thought this assignment was relevant because it was the first assignment that had us applying what we're learning to a real-world context. There was not necessarily a right or wrong answer, and it allowed us to think about how we would handle it if we were in this situation. My reflection was, I enjoyed thinking about how I'd handle this situation if I was in it. On the surface, it seems like such a minor situation, but there's actually a lot hinging on how the principal handles the situation. We need to remember that sometimes what seems minor can have major impacts, and it's interesting to think of all of the ways she could have handled the situation and why we think our way was the best. Thank you very much. Bye.